Hey guys, so there are a lot of questions online about minimalist shoes and barefoot shoes. Yes or no? That is the question. I assume for someone who doesn't practice or doesn't coach running, barefoot running and minimalist shoe running, it must be very confusing to know what actually the situation is. So let me summarize basically my experience as a runner and as a coach. 20 years ago, the science was that pronation of the foot, when your foot is sinking, needs to be corrected. It's not good. Now we start to understand that, well, that is an essential part of running. So if your shoe doesn't allow the pronation, there's no way for you to run properly. Minimalist shoes are the right direction because it frees up your foot. If you look at this old 5-finger shoe, one of the first ones that came out in the minimalist shoe era, this is so flexible because it's just made out of kangaroo skin that basically doesn't give any support for your foot whatsoever, which is very good if your foot is strong, but very dangerous if your foot is deconditioned, i.e. you have been wearing shoes while you're running. The rest of your body might be able to run for a long periods of time because you've been conditioning it, but your foot has been in a cast in the form of shoe. And now suddenly, if you take your shoe off, your foot needs to start to work, and it's just not up for the task. So if you start to wear a minimalist shoe, you can't just jump into it. You have got to think through what you're gonna do, even if you have a lot of experience in running. Indeed, that is the most dangerous time for someone to start wearing minimalist shoe if you have a lot of experience as a runner. You can't just take away the support and expect to be able to use your foot properly. What you need to do is you need to adjust your regimen to the condition of your foot. You should assume that you have absolutely no conditioning to your foot if you have been wearing shoes all the time. So if you want to use 5-finger shoes, all the power to you, but you have got to be very, very, very adamant about starting very little and gradually work yourself up. Otherwise you can break the bones in your foot. Indeed, this is what happened to Vibram 5-fingers, that they had this wonderful equipment they developed, which is the 5-finger shoes, this minimalist shoe. But people, especially runners, just took it like, oh, excellent, I'm gonna put it on and I'm gonna run like I always ran. But they're used to running with the cushion, so their feet were just deconditioned. And once you put the shoe on, your deconditioned foot couldn't handle what your knees, your hips, and your lower back and your body is used to running-wise. This is why all those injuries occurred. It's not because the shoe was wrong, it's because people's feet were so deconditioned and suddenly they put the shoe on where you had to have conditioned foot. People expect their feet to let them know when it's too much, but that is the problem. You do not have pain receptors in your bones. As you're running and your feet are not conditioned enough to be able to shock absorb enough every time when you land on the ground with your foot that now needs to shock absorb. If you're not able to shock absorb properly, there's a lot of shock goes through the bones of your foot and you're not able to feel that when it's happening. Is it yes or no for minimalist shoes? I believe it's the right direction. Anytime when you ask me, should I wear a shoe to run? I will tell you, well, it's abnormal. That's not how the human body has been designed by nature. You should not wear a shoe when you run. But if you're not okay and not comfortable running barefoot, because I understand, we live in cities which are somewhat unnatural. It's easy not to see the attractive side of barefoot running if you don't have the right environment accessible to you. So in that regard, minimalist shoes might be a very good choice for you because it still allows your foot to work more, but you still want to cover it. Then minimalist shoes are a wise way to go. So I would say yes to minimalist shoes in terms of movement for your foot. It's definitely a huge step up what your foot needs to be able to bring to the table when it comes to running versus when you're using traditional running shoes. In terms of safety, as long as you're willing to deal with your ego and do very little amount of running for a good chunk of time and very gradually, slowly work up the amount of time and the intensity and the speed of your running, as long as you do that, minimalist shoes will take good care of you. What if you have flat foot? What if you have any kind of Achilles tendon issues? Well, those issues coming from a deconditioned leg, at least part of your leg is deconditioned. When you have a flat foot, that basically means the muscles that basically creates the muscle tone in the arch of your foot are just so deconditioned that your foot is just flattens out. Yes, that is a problem. Yes, you got to be careful. How can you address that? If you go online and you look it up, you will see a lot of foot specialists will tell you you need an arch support. In my book, if you don't have an arch and you put a support to it, are you going to encourage your body to create strength there? You will not. All you do is putting a band-aid on it. This issue will always remain an issue. In my book, if you have a weak foot and a flat foot, you've got to condition it. It's a good way to condition the foot if you start to walk barefoot more. You can also walk with minimalist shoe more, but you have to start very little. If you're not careful with it, the deformed foot can become very irritating for the joints in the foot and around your ankle. You want to be very conservative when you start walking with minimalist shoes or barefoot for the sake of strengthening up your foot. But definitely, if you start to do it a little and you keep increasing it little by little, then over time you will have a much more robust foot. Indeed, when you start to run barefoot, or if you successfully manage transitioning into minimalist shoes, what ends up happening that the arch of your foot becomes more pronounced. You will have a bigger arch in your foot. The way the foot works is when you land it on the ground like a spring. It does this kind of movement. So when you use your foot a lot, you will have a bigger arch. Barefoot walking on variety of terrains will help your foot to learn how to trigger those muscles on the sole of your foot more effectively. What if your Achilles tendon is messed up? Now the Achilles tendon is already working a lot while you're running. Indeed, that is the only time when the Achilles tendon really works, when you run. Now imagine if it's doing its job, it's working hard. Now what happens if another structure, like your foot, is not able to do its job? It's not able to give enough bounce back into your next stride. The Achilles tendon will need to work harder. So when the Achilles tendon is working harder, naturally over time, it can get stressed. So a lot of Achilles tendon injuries come from overuse of the Achilles tendon, which comes from the lack of use of the foot. So once you fix your foot and your foot becomes more capable, it does take off tension from your Achilles tendon. Now the whole foot and the whole leg and your whole body actually works differently when you activate your foot properly, barefoot or with minimalist shoes. It's not just about the running shoe, it's also the shoe that you're wearing on the street in the everydays. That kind of shoe is also debilitating your foot from movement. So wearing Vibram 5 fingers in your everyday or minimalist shoes in the everyday is also a wise idea. It's not only when you're training, when your foot needs to move. Anytime when you move over top a surface, your foot meant to do its job. You walk differently when you're barefoot versus when you walk with shoes. Minimalist shoes, barefoot running shoes, or yes, as long as you put a lot of thought to it and a lot of education to it. I would highly recommend to consult with someone who has a good track record of conditioning people into minimalist footwear. If you're not a specialist, then what you want to do is be super conservative and do even less than you think you should. Conditioning your foot is a long con. You have to prepare yourself for the long term. And you're asking me, what if you don't want to think about it too much? Well, run barefoot. If you run barefoot, you don't need to think about it because your foot will always tell you how much you can do in the form of pain. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions, just make a comment below. Also click on like and subscribe if you haven't. And share this with anyone who you think might be interested. Any runners, anyone who considers getting into running, anyone who's an experienced runner, anyone who's thinking about transitioning into more minimalist type of footwear or even barefoot running. Thanks guys, take care, bye.